Hey guys, it's Graham. This is my review of The Whys of Heart by Hans Schantz. So picture this. You're a writer, but also a physicist, and you are friends with some incredibly brilliant people in different scientific fields. There's a current day political debate going on, and you would like to tackle it in your writing, but you're not sure how. One day you're sitting at home and watching a movie about the Scopes monkey trial, where a man was put on trial for teaching evolution in a state-funded school at a time when that was against the law. Now, the teacher, whose last name was Scopes, violated the law intentionally so that it could be tested in court and thus establish some sort of legal precedent in the ongoing debate between fundamentalists and modernists. You, the physicist writer, suddenly get an idea. When this case actually happened in 1925, evolution in education actually was a hot button topic. What's the hot button topic in state funded education right now? You'd be hard pressed to find a button hotter than transgenderism or any ideology of its ilk. And thus, Hans Schantz came up with the seed of The Whys of Heart, which retells the Scopes trial and centers the issue firmly on gender identity. So, the story. Much like the Scopes trial, our story begins with a teacher intentionally violating a new statute called the Gaia Act. Gaia stands for Gender Affirmation in Academics, or Gender Identity, gender whatever, something to that effect. It issues guidelines for state-funded schools and what they can or can't teach with regard to biological sex, gender, preferred pronoun usage, and so on. The teacher does this in coordination with the school and local politicians so that the act itself can be tried in court. Otherwise, it's just paper law. There's no application for it until it's been tried. For the defense, our main character, his name is Mike, he has a red-blooded, pro-life, heterosexual male lawyer/politician named Chad. Subtle. For the prosecution, the state hires a soft AOC stand-in named Roxy, who enjoys a large social media following and has her eye set on an eventual White House run. From there, the case gets underway, and Schantz relies heavily on transcripts from the Scopes 1925 case, rewriting the current-day gender and sex arguments to follow the beats of the 1925 evolution and creation arguments. This is where the book does some of its best work, ramping up the excitement and the drama in the way that great legal thrillers do. While Mike, Chad, and Roxy take the bulk of the page time, we do have a supporting cast around them, and this is where I'm going to confess that I've already forgotten a lot of their names. I read this book 2 weeks ago, and I read about a dozen books a month, so sometimes this happens. Nevertheless, I remember the roles that these characters played. Mike, for example, has a longtime girlfriend who is opposite him on the political spectrum, though Mike himself is not a hardline right-winger. He's a biologist. He's on a tenure track, and he wants to advance his career, but he won't compromise hard science to get there. His girlfriend, her name was AC. She also works in education, and her mother is the school superintendent. She's got it out for Mike, and she doesn't like that AC is dating him. AC also has purple hair a lot of the time, but she and Mike have a healthy relationship at the core. That relationship is put to the test throughout the trial as AC presses Mike to apologize to a student for explaining something that didn't affirm her gender or misgendered her. Mike refuses to do so because he knows he did nothing wrong. All he did was teach biology. This conviction drives the dramatic center of the story. The supporting cast are there to represent other adamant worldviews, but even though they offer a limited range for the narrative, they're still enjoyable to read for the most part, and they keep the story moving. Here's where I want to separate what was good from this story from what was bad, because I do have a couple of criticisms to offer. I'll admit that I struggled with this book in the beginning. As it is with all political fiction, I worried about the tone and whether it would be preachy or heavy-handed. And there are tidbits throughout that'll come off that way depending on your political intensity or affiliation. Once the trial begins and the story hits its stride, it does some of its best work, and it lays out a perspective that often gets drowned in the public discussion of sex and gender issues. This is an excellent stress test of the arguments around biological sex and so-called gender identity, poking holes in their logic and limitations where possible, and pushing committed characters to defend their positions. In this way, the book preserves a current-day argument for the future in the same way that the Scopes trial gives us a detailed look at a debate 100 years ago. And one of the underrated elements of the book was a glimpse at 2020 style media coverage of the case, with several small brand internet personalities descending on the town to cover it with their own biases, all of whom were convinced they were right. The hardcore liberal brands himself as a semi Buddhist logic adherent. The hardcore conservative smothers his speech with hyperbole and sponsorship reads. There's even an alt-right drag queen that feels like a stand-in for the infamous Lady MAGA dude that used to go viral a lot. If you follow more than 2 or 3 YouTubers who cover news, court cases, or ongoing cultural phenomena, you'll read these little side character additions and nod your head in agreement. Think back to a lot of the social media coverage around, say, the Kyle Rittenhouse case or the Daniel Penny case or any other local case that's garnered national interest. A lot of these influencer type accounts descend on the area because they see a chance to make a name for themselves, and they're not at all abashed in their particular biases, we'll say. Hans Schantz really nailed that aspect of it as he let the story unfold. But back to the trial itself, not only does Schantz lay out the case for biological fact, he lays out the history of gender studies and the sordid characters behind the curtain. In fact, this book might be the first time that a lot of people hear what John Money did to the Reimer twins. May he burn in hell forever. Google that one with caution, but it does play a critical role in this issue, in the history of it. So now that the good stuff is out of the way, let's talk about the bad. I want to be fair here. I don't want to just hype up this book because I backed it during the crowdfunding campaign. Hans did originally put it up on Kickstarter, and then somebody found out that he was writing a book about gender, and they got Kickstarter to punt it. He ended up finishing the crowdfunding on Fund My Comic, and that's ultimately where the whole thing was fulfilled. I think he got a lot of news coverage. This book was finished a couple of years ago. I just got around to reading it in December of 24. So I was a backer of it, and I also like Hans. I know him through social media. We're small press, self-published writers in the same circles, but I would say these things if I didn't know him, so they're still true. While legal dramas are at their best when there's also drama outside of the courtroom, The Wise of Heart had a little too much of that drama, and as a result, it lost its focus at times. It stopped being just a commentary on sex and gender issues, and it became a commentary on Antifa-style domestic terrorism, or on abortion, or on COVID vaccines as a social status. For example, Chad and Roxy, the lawyers who represent both sides in court, they had a romantic entanglement in the past, but since Roxy now hates Chad, she accuses him of having raped her. And she also brags about how he got her pregnant, but she killed the baby without telling him. She even gets a little descriptive about the abortion process, too, and just to twist the knife. Mike and AC also have a fight near the end of the second act, but then they make up, and she gives a public confession of her newfound conservative traditionalism. When the case is over, she even makes a public spectacle of having the judge marry her to Mike right there in front of everyone so that they can start a family and move to a farm somewhere. That's cool and all, but it also felt a little on the nose. It worked for what it was trying to do, but it also took me out of the story a little bit. The most severe part deserves a spoiler warning, though, so if you don't want to know, skip for the next minute or so, minute and a half tops, and we'll get to the conclusion. So, spoiler warning, here we go. Roxy, who's the AOC type character, the lawyer, she's set to announce a run for the White House after the case is over, but when she shows up for her presser outside the courthouse, surrounded by her adoring fans, she also boasts that she has a Band-Aid on her arm from her recent 6th booster, or COVID shot. Then, while she's giving her speech, she comes down with a rapid onset case of quote-unquote died suddenly, which did happen to a concerning number of people from 21 and 22. It probably still does, I don't know, but the point is the vaccine once again claimed the life of another vax cheerleader. Again, it's not that I have a problem with an in-story portrayal of this real-world occurrence. It's just that in this book about a trial of an educator who teaches science, there's suddenly a lot of other issues taking the stage. It stopped being about what it was about, and it tried being about 4 or 5 other things. And that's without me even mentioning the Antifa stuff. While all of these things are real and even likely to happen in the event of such a trial, stacking them on top of each other felt heavy-handed and unfocused. So that's the end of the spoilers. Let's talk about the conclusion. Ultimately, Hans Schantz swung for the fence on a highly sensitive issue, and he hit it out of the park as long as he was focusing on that issue. Since this wasn't going to be a series, I imagine he wanted to comment on a few peripheral aspects of the case and the culture in which it was set, which could explain the other issues getting pushed into the story. The important thing is that it succeeded in what it set out to do, to retell the story of a 100-year-old trial in a way that is highly relevant for us today, and will be for future generations to study. For that reason, I gave it 4 stars out of 5. As for a content warning, given that it's a book about biological sex and gender, as well as abortion in some spots, there's a bit of sex talk and a couple of F-bombs. There's a few bits of religious blasphemy too, and some rioters blow up a few cars. Other than that, it's not prevalent or excessive. So in the end, why read this book? Well, I've been consuming legal analysis as entertainment pretty steadily for the last 3 years or so, and I've gained an appreciation for compelling fiction that can also teach hard facts with good arguments. Schantz succeeds in what he set out to do and presents a set of talking points that are easy to digest and worth understanding. So for that reason, I think you should check it out and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Check the description for the links and such. Until next time, drive safe. See you out there.